Barnaby Joyce is most certainly not the hero that One Nation wanted, but he might just be the hero that One Nation needs if they want to become the reform of Australia. Joyce continues his on-again, off-again dance with One Nation, having dined with Pauline Hanson and enjoyed the rare delicacy of a sandwich press-cooked steak. But he hasn't yet, at least as I record this, confirmed his defection to the fast-rising minor party of One Nation. But it is pretty much a given that he will join them sooner or later, and probably sooner. But will this help One Nation's rise or hinder it? To answer that, we have to have a frank conversation about One Nation, about what they are, what they aren't, and most importantly, what they need. Because Barnaby Joyce might be the thing that they need the most. And if you doubt that, have a look at the reaction from the Liberal and Nationals parties who are trying every trick in the book to bully Joyce out of his planned defection. They've already failed to stop him from leaving the Nationals, where, let's not forget, he was once the leader of the party and a deputy prime minister under both Turnbull and Morrison until 2022. Now, they're making their last-ditch efforts to bully him out of completing the switch to One Nation. The Nationals trying this hard to stop Barnaby from completing this move is all the evidence you need to know that they're scared of something. Because they know that Barnaby Joyce going to One Nation has the potential to turn Barnaby Joyce into the unlikely Nigel Farage of Australia. I'll get to the details in a moment, but first, my name's Topher Field. This is the Topher Project, and I help busy Australians like you to cut through the crap that we get fed in the media and from our politicians, and I help you to make sense of the nonsense that surrounds us. I'm 100% viewer supported, so if you appreciate my work, then please support it by buying me a coffee via my website, topherfield.com. You can buy me as many coffees as you'd like, so I can stay caffeinated and keep producing videos like this one. And if you like my videos, then you will love my books about government, power, and civil disobedience. Plus, you'll find my DVD documentary, Battleground Melbourne, along with my new line of t-shirts, hoodies, caps, and, by popular demand, yes, now we have stickers. You can stop asking for them. And you'll find all of that at topherfield.com. Make sure you check out the new website while you're there, and you'll find the merch at the shop tab at the top at topherfield.com. And of course, everything you buy helps me to keep the Topher Project going. Okay, depending on who you ask, Barnaby Joyce joining One Nation is either a desperate last gasp for relevance from Barnaby the political has-been, or perhaps it's an existential crisis for One Nation and its ageing leader, Pauline Hanson. But if you talk to different people, they'll tell you that it's a match made in heaven and could propel One Nation to huge electoral success and potentially send Barnaby Joyce back to Canberra with more clout than he ever had, even when he was Deputy Prime Minister. Now, what do I think of all those predictions? Well, I think it's actually all of the above. I think that Barnaby Joyce is regarded by the Nationals and the Liberals as a has-been, both because of his age, but also because of the scandals that he has endured in the past. And he was never going to be given the respect that his success and standing within the party deserves. So yeah, in that sense, Joyce is a has-been. At least he would be if he tried to stay with the LNP. But beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and whilst no one would accuse Barnaby Joyce of being beautiful, he certainly looks different from the perspective of One Nation. Now, One Nation, for their part, well, they're on the rise. That's clear. They're scoring comfortably in the mid to high teens in the latest opinion polls and rising still, meaning that they are now a bigger electoral force than the Greens and bigger than the Nationals by themselves. And they've now taken over very clearly in the number 3 spot in Australian federal politics. Now, if One Nation had achieved this in the 90s or 2000s when Pauline was in her 40s and 50s, you would have said that the future for her was bright. But it's happening now, in the mid-2020s. And Pauline Hanson is 71 years of age. Now, to be fair, she still has a lot of fight in her. And based on her recent comments, she plans to run again for the Senate at the next federal election, which is a seat that she will win with ease. But that means that she'll be something like 78 years of age at the end of her next term in Parliament. And that's a problem. If One Nation are going to do in Australia what the Reform Party under Nigel Farage have done in the UK, the last thing they need is uncertainty about their leadership. And whilst I wish Pauline a long, happy and healthy life, the fact is that for most of us, things start to go wrong in our 70s, and by our late 70s, even the best of us are slowing down. Now, Malcolm Roberts is a well-established alternative One Nation senator, and I have nothing but respect for him, but he's also 70 years of age. And whilst he can certainly hold his own in the present day, the cruel reality of time means that he's not the future of the party either. Not if they're going to have the kind of meteoric rise and all of the pressure that comes with it, like what Reform had in the UK. And yes, at the last federal election, One Nation got 2 more senators elected, with Tyrone Whitten and Sean Bell now holding Senate seats. And whilst they are most certainly younger, they lack political pedigree. They have not yet been tested by fire the way that both Pauline and Malcolm, and to be fair, Barnaby Joyce, have. In terms of public recognition, they are nowhere. Now that will change with time, of course, but for a fast-rising party, crossing your fingers and hoping for the best, hoping that your rookies will mature fast enough to replace your aging stalwarts, well, that's not a good strategy. Enter Barnaby Joyce. Now, he is well known, both for the better and for the worse, but in terms of the One Nation brand and policy platform, well, One Nation pretty much are today what the Nationals used to be when Barnaby joined them, before they followed the Liberals into their present soft-left agrarian socialist position. So I think Joyce can honestly say that he didn't leave the Nationals Party. The Nationals Party left him. And the party that now fits what he stands for, well, that's One Nation. So from a policy point of view, I think he fits. From a public profile point of view, he is certainly going to win them votes and not lose them. But, and the importance of this cannot be overstated, Barnaby Joyce is 58 years of age, 13 years younger than Pauline Hanson. And when he's keeping the weight off and staying off the sauce, he looks healthy enough and up for the fight. And having been a deputy prime minister for years, he knows the political game inside, out and backwards. So that's why I think that simultaneously Barnaby Joyce is a political has-been who is trying to find a new home before he gets relegated to the dustbin of history. And One Nation are desperate for younger but still experienced blood so that their party doesn't implode under the pressure of their newfound popularity, and that therefore, because of those two things, this could very well be a match made in heaven for them all. And the similarities between Nigel Farage in the UK and Barnaby Joyce in Australia cannot be ignored. And with Barnaby Joyce inside their tent, bringing real leadership experience from the highest levels of the Australian government, you have to think that the case for One Nation only gets stronger, not weaker, with him on board. But what are the risks? Are there any downsides? Well, of course there are. The biggest danger now is that the strength of all the personalities involved means that they simply cannot all stay in the same tent. One Nation have a long history of losing members after they get elected, including Mark Latham, Rod Roberts, Stephen Andrew, Jeff Newth, Brian Burston, Rod Cullerton, Sarah Game, and there's more that I've missed. Now, on the one hand, you could point to One Nation, therefore, as a dysfunctional party. They just can't keep their members. But then on the other hand, if you listed the defections from the other minor parties, including the Greens, state and federal, the UAP, well, unfortunately, it seems that high turnover is par for the course among these smaller parties. But just because it's normal doesn't mean that it's not a problem. And in the case of One Nation, it's been the personal strength of Pauline Hanson that has sustained them for all of these very tough decades. But it's also that very same strength of personality from Pauline Hanson that makes it more difficult for other strong personalities to find the space they need to be able to get along inside the same tent. But I suspect that that will be less of an issue now that Pauline is in her 70s. She knows that if her work, if One Nation is going to last, she has to hand it over to someone else. That reality is reflected in the fact that Pauline Hanson announced last month that she is removing her name from the party. It'll simply be called One Nation going forward. And yes, up until this point in time, it was still called Pauline Hanson One Nation. She knows that she's approaching time. It's time to hand the baton over. And that mindset shift from Pauline might be the very thing that's needed in order to make room for another strong personality in the party, to make room for a Barnaby Joyce. So the remaining question becomes, will Barnaby then run for the New South Wales Senate? Or might he make a bid for a lower house seat? And why? Well, the Senate's easier to win, and if Barnaby were the number one spot on the One Nation Senate ticket in New South Wales, then on current polling, his election to the Senate is absolutely assured. But you can't be Prime Minister if you're a senator. You have to be in the lower house. Now, to be clear, let's be serious. There's no chance of a One Nation Prime Minister at the next election. Oh wait, that's what they said about Reform last year as well. So the choice that I suspect Pauline Hanson and Barnaby Joyce are discussing over the Sandwich Press grilled steaks is whether Barnaby Joyce should join Pauline and the three other senators in the Senate at the next election, probably with another one or two more new senators besides, creating a One Nation Senate voting bloc of 6, maybe 7 One Nation senators who might then hold the balance of power in the Senate and rival the Greens for influence in the upper house. That's what I would call the safe option. But hear me out for a second. What if One Nation winning that Senate seat in New South Wales is already a given? What if they don't need the Barnaby Joyce name on the ticket to make that happen? What if Barnaby Joyce ran in his existing lower house seat of New England, which he won with a 2/3 majority of the vote at the last election over the top of a Labor opposition, and might fancy his chances of still winning even if it were a three-way fight with an alternative Nationals opponent in there as well? What if he really believes that One Nation are about to have their reform moment in the next 2 years before the next federal election? Now that's a gutsy call, that's a risk, make no mistake. But that would mean that Barnaby Joyce would go into the next federal election campaigning to be Australia's next Prime Minister, urging all Australians to vote One Nation not only in the upper house for senators, but also in the lower house for lower house MPs. So that if One Nation really do have their reform moment, this would mean not only that One Nation are claiming the balance of power in the Senate, but perhaps the balance of power in the lower house as well. Or maybe One Nation could go from desperate to government, and Barnaby Joyce could go from outcast to Prime Minister in just 2 years. Impossible? Don't discount it, because it's very clear to me that the Nationals and the Liberals are very scared of something. My name's Topher Field. This is the Topher Project, and I help busy Australians like you to cut through the crap and make sense of the nonsense in the media and from our politicians. I'm 100% viewer supported, so please buy me a coffee via the button that you'll find at the homepage of topherfield.com. And if you like my videos, then you will love my books, DVDs, and also make sure that you check out all of the new merch that we just launched yesterday. You'll find it all at the shop at topherfield.com. Thank you for watching to the end. The algorithm loves you and so do I. Please like, comment, subscribe, send me a comment to let me know which of these options do you think will actually happen in reality. And let me know whether you think that a Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce is actually a realistic possibility. Do make sure you've subscribed, and as always, think free.